and then they just posted it on a whole bunch of lunchboxes. I'm not a fan.
Okay. Understood.
If you couldn't tell from my descriptor.
I've got the whole Justice League here.
Yeah.
Do you like this?
Yeah.
This is that classic art that you see quite a lot. I want to say like what, 70s art, would you say?
Yeah.
What do you think? A lot of 70s art.
That looks like Dick Grayson.
Anyway, let's talk comic books.
All right. You can find more about this show and others like it at our network's website, radiomeanwhile.com.
Other shows on the network include Three Nice Things, where we force ourselves to say 3 nice things about a movie with a bad and often earned reputation. Radio 64, featuring video game music remix radio. Previously on X-Men, the podcast that looks back on X-Men comics, movies, shows, characters, and more. And 9021 Here We Go, a 90210 rewatch podcast hosted by a 9021 expert and a 9021 novice.
Which one are you?
I'm the 9021 expert. Mm-hmm. Thanks for asking.
Yeah, no problem.
I started in the early days on 90210.
Right.
And pretty much loved it.
Right.
Always. So that's me.
Right.
That is me. Let's talk a little bit, Eric, about why we're sitting here talking to each other about comic books. How do you think this show began? Let's see if our answers align.
Nick and I also host a podcast, unattached from Radio Meanwhile, because it's actually the official podcast of the David A. Howe Public Library.
That's right.
This podcast is called the All the Books Show, where we talk book news, author news, and literary news.
Yes.
And every time we start the episode, we actually talk about our bookmark and what we've been reading. And while we are reading books, novels, and biographies, and all that other stuff, Nick and I are also normally bookmarking a whole lot of comic books. And not everybody who listens to All the Book Show is probably listening to it for the comic book stuff, but maybe, and this is where our hearts have led us, maybe some of the people listening to it wish we talked about comic books more.
That's what they want. That's what they want, maybe.
There's a lot of times where I'm reading X-Men comics, and I'll just say, I've read a bunch of X-Men comics, but I want to talk about every single issue.
And I typically just pick, like, I use the trade paperback titles and maybe just pick the top 3 or so that might have sort of more of a universal. Like if there's a Superman title, I might just say the Superman title. I don't even talk about a lot of the other ones. Yeah. And even with that, in the editing process, we usually clip out a little bit more just to keep it in line with, the time constraints of the rest of the episode. So after 250 plus episodes, we were finally like, why are we doing this to ourselves? Mm-hmm. We both have this passion. It's something that bonded us early on. I remember in the early days when we first met, you were at my house for a group was over, and you sort of stumbled into the side room and saw like a wall of graphic novels.
I grabbed your Prelude to Planet Hulk comic, because that's technically where I was in like reading the Hulk. It's where I left off right before college.
Yep. So, and there it was, like an omen. And you proceeded to read that and Planet Hulk while the rest of us watched a movie.
We watched not a great episode of Monty Python's Flying Circus.
That's true. Yeah. That's true. That is what happened.
Yeah.
But then after that, when I was working in the library where you went to college, you were I was interlibrary loaning all your requests, and so we just sort of got to know each other's like comic book preferences, the things we liked, and there's some overlap.
It was like Rainbow Rowell's Attachments,
pretty much,
but only with comic books.
Yeah, exactly. That's the way that it went.
Yeah.
So, and then after that, we started watching Marvel was doing direct to DVD animated movies at the time. They're not doing that anymore. DC was doing that, so we started watching all those together. We did the round robin Green Lantern Blackest Night reading.
Oh yeah,
because DC is notorious to this day for putting together trade paperbacks that don't make a drop of sense. Yeah. And those were definitely some of them, because to try to read Blackest Night just with trade title, the story was nonsensical. So we got everything, found a reading list, sat across from each other, and just passed copies back and forth. But take me way back to the early days, Eric. How long has this been an interest of yours? What are some of the early comic books that really caught your attention?
The comic books in general, when I started reading them, would be like the year 2000. But I guess before that, I was reading Jeff Smith's Bone inside the pages of Disney Adventures.
Interesting.
So
Disney Adventures, though, did have a lot of comics in there as well.
Yeah, I read a lot of comics of Disney Adventures. You're sure, absolutely. But Bone was printed in there.
Do you remember? Sorry about that time. Do you remember the Batman Superman magazine that came out? Did you ever get that?
I wasn't buying comic books then. Okay. I wasn't paying attention to the end of that.
It was like I mean, it was a magazine. It wasn't a comic book. It'd be like in the
Oh
grocery
no,
store aisle with the other magazines.
no,
I loved that. I don't
yeah,
think it lasted very long,
no.
but
I was
Disney
pure
Adventure.
Disney Adventures. Yeah,
Okay. Disney Adventures, primarily for the Darkwing Duck stuff, and Batman Superman magazine, and Archie. I mean, always Archie,
sure.
but those were my go-tos in the aisle. All right. So it was 2000s when you really started picking up comic books,
It
and what
was
was it
the
that?
year 2000. It was because of the very first X-Men movie. It was coming
Oh,
out. I hadn't seen it yet, and
okay.
you know what? I remember because I remember seeing like an episode or two, um, like once or twice. They meant I saw like an episode once or twice about the X-Men animated series, and then inside Disney Adventures, like a couple of months before the movie was coming out or something, they just had a one-page spread of the characters who were going to be in the movie with the actor's profile and each of the characters like comic book
Okay.
art. And I remember looking at that and being like, "Huh, I kind of remember seeing stuff about the X-Men when I was a kid." And
This
so
is crazy to me.
I just went from that interest to my local library, which had the Essential X-Men Volume 1, which starts with Giant Size X-Men and then goes with the rest of Chris Claremont's stuff. I just
Okay,
read that.
so not like classic Stan Lee X-Men
Not the
stuff.
Stan Lee stuff, the
Okay.
stuff that Len
Yeah.
and Cockrum were doing, and then it became
Hmm.
Chris Claremont, and then I went that way. But also my library had it had the Essential Spider-Man comic. So I was kind of going
Okay.
between the Stan Lee Spider-Man and the Chris Claremont X-Men in terms of my reading. And I really didn't like diverge from that too much
Okay.
until gosh, maybe like 2002 when I started really getting into other titles
Okay.
like Sandman and Daredevil and whatnot.
Okay.
So,
Wow.
yeah.
It's funny because I mean I knew that the X-Men movie was pivotal in your whole like just the comic book world's opening up to you. I
Hmm.
guess I didn't realize just how true that is that like advertising for that movie you were like, "Oh, the X-Men are a thing.
Hmm.
I'll go find a comic book."
Yeah.
That's funny.
No,
That's funny
I
that's so
mean, I
late in the game.
was 2000. I was turning 14. I mean, growing up, as a kid, as a individual kid, I had no money. Any
Mhm.
money I had was rare and far between. So like, the stuff I'd ask for or have get money for were the Animorphs and video games,
Okay.
and so I didn't really know too much about comic books, so I just wouldn't even have had the money to go and spend it on comic books.
Okay, but even so well like what system did you have?
System, I had a Super Nintendo.
Now, are there a lot of comic book games on that? Cuz I
Super
feel like
Nintendo? Oh yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, Super Nintendo and then a Nintendo 64. So in the
Okay.
year 2000, that would be still my Nintendo 64. So
Okay.
you could also kind of say Spider-Man 2000 on the PlayStation 1
Oh,
also
okay.
kind of grabbed my attention because I was like, what is all this stuff in the Spider-Man
Yeah.
universe? So
Wow.
yeah.
So you weren't even familiar with the like Spider-Man animated series and stuff that was
I mean,
on.
I saw some of the Spider-Man animated series. Really, the superhero cartoon I watched the most in terms of like the DC Marvel characters would have been the Batman animated series and the Superman animated series
Okay.
when I was coming home from school, like in 1998 into 2000, like on Kids WB. But
Okay.
I wasn't like reading the comics or anything; they were just there.
Okay.
So, yeah,
Oh, that's interesting.
yeah.
For me, it's I mean all roads lead back to Super Friends. Hanna-Barbera Super Friends. I don't remember a time when I wasn't aware of that because of that. And I watched that show religiously. I mean, even as a very small child, I'd be like, "What time is it?" Saturday. Like I knew when it was and would run in there. And the day that I went in there on a Saturday when it was supposed to be on and something else was on, I was crushed.
Right.
And it took a while to get over that. But that was my introduction to that, and the action figures that went with it was my introduction to pretty much all superheroes, at least DC wise, because the action figures that went along with it
Mm-hmm.
is such a weird. The Kenner action figures from the early 80s, it starts as you would expect. I mean, Superman, Batman, Wonder Woman, Green Lantern,
Right.
what you would expect, right?
Mm-hmm.
The more you go on in that series, the more nonsensical it becomes. Some they would just invent, like Golden Pharaoh, for example.
Mm-hmm.
Golden Pharaoh was like a pink and yellow action figure who had like these purple and yellow, had these purple wings. And I just never understood what his deal was, and it turns out they just made him up for the action figure line.
Yeah.
And of course, Super Friends would make up characters, but
Yeah.
like Golden Pharaoh always stood out to me as like, what a weird thing to do. And then it got really heavy into the new gods. So it was like Mr. Miracle and Calabac and Parademons,
Right.
just like weird stuff.
There was a point somewhere in the 90s, I don't know where, my grandmother had gotten my younger brother of 4 years, this like 8 character set. And so like I'm thinking we're talking about like 1996, 97 maybe. And it was like Iron Man, Thing, Hulk, Wolverine, Venom, Spider-Man, Silver Surfer, Ghost Rider. And I just didn't know anything. Like I split them in 4s, but I remember I was like, Ghost Rider's the head bad guy here. I didn't know their names. I just Flame Skull and this stuff. And like Venom is like Spider-Man's friend, but he can't control his evilness. So it was just all this like I just didn't know this stuff. Even with the action figures, even though I thought the action figures were cool.
Yeah.
So
wow.
Yeah.
Yeah. See, so I went Super Friends. Adam West, Burt Ward, Batman, classic Batman 66. I watched that a ton. My grandma, who had cable and we didn't, taped a bunch of episodes on there. So the episodes on that tape I've seen 100 times.
Yeah.
Same with the Superboy show from the early days.
Well, when you're talking
Superboy.
shows, like that stuff all predates any of the comic book stuff. Because I was watching the Flesher cartoons of Superman and the Batman animated series and the Batman movies. And like I've seen this stuff, but like in terms I was like, I'm going to spend money on an actual comic book. Yeah. So when's the first time you bought a comic book?
I mean, right along with that stuff. That would be things that I would get like like from garage sales or whatever, we'd pick up a stack of comic books or something like that. Or there was a grocery store that we would go to quite often had a little tiny bright, vibrant teal building called Collector's Cove, which was comic books. And of course, up on top, as you would expect, would be the pricier comic books. And all along the base of it was long boxes of just quarter comics. And, I would have $1 or 50 cents or whatever that I could spend on comics. And so I would go in there and I would flip through, not really paying any attention to like, this is part 2 of a 3-part series or whatever. Just if the cover caught my attention, I would grab it. So that was a lot of like Silver Age, Superman primarily, but Superman, Batman, Wonder Woman is probably what I have the most of. Aquaman, I have a lot of Aquaman and Shazam. That was the stuff I would get to in the early days. I started discovering Marvel, I think, a little later because I loved Pride of the X-Men, pilot, and Spider-Man and His Amazing Friends. Right. So that was my introduction to Marvel. So I would get those things. And I would kind of gravitate towards the ones I saw, so Spider-Man primarily.
Yeah.
But then early on, I got really interested into Marvel's What If series. Did you ever read those?
Yeah, I've read some What Ifs.
Those were the ones that I would actually like save up for. I remember there was one that was like, what if Phoenix had lived?
Yep.
And I didn't really even know much about Phoenix at the time, because she's not in Pride of the X-Men.
Yeah.
But I kind of understood basically like there was something with Jean Grey or whatever. But that was like $3.50, and I had to save up for weeks to get that comic.
What ifs tend to like? What if the story went differently than how we published it? Everything goes wrong. Everybody's dead.
Exactly. Yeah. It was never one that was like, and then everybody was happy.
Yeah, this is actually a better result for people.
Yeah. Spider-Man and his parents had a wonderful time growing up together. Yeah. But yeah, that's kind of how it would go. I would just stock up on quarter comics, garage sale bins, anytime that I could get, a pack of comics, I would do it. I had this big orange box that I got at the comic book store, and it had like Hulk and Superman and just random characters on it. Yeah. It was just cardboard. But that was like my first comic book box, and I would just buy new things and fill that up, whatever struck my fancy. So I have some things that make perfect sense, and then I have a lot of like Rom the Space Knight and like Turok the Dinosaur Hunter and just random things, that I was like, oh, interesting.
I can't tell you the day I went into the library and got Essential X-Men. It was during the summer of 2000. So that's when I read those. But I can tell you the month I bought my very first comic book, because it was Uncanny X-Men 392, and that was published May 2001.
Oh.
That is what. So I had been reading the Essentials for about a year, getting them from the library, and then buying them on my own as I obtained money. And yeah, so this was. I don't even think I bought part 2 for a while. I think it was slow that I got back in, because this is about where I started reading, like right after the Eve of Destruction. So right right around the 390s is where I started reading Uncanny X-Men, like on a kind of monthly basis. I'd just like take whatever $5 or $10 I had and go to the comic book store and buy that one. Like I remember I got this issue and I was like, I guess I put it on my bookshelf. So
it was a long time before I was really like collecting specific runs and trying to follow certain stories. I remember there was one that I was from the Quarterman. I was getting a Superboy, and it was like a time travel one, and it was a 4-part series, and I got to the end of it, and it was like continued in Action Comics, 243 or whatever. And so I'm like scouring in a pre-internet age different comic book stores trying to find this random like early 80s issue of Superman that would complete this Superboy run that I got. And I feel like that was kind of a turning point when I started being a little bit more discerning about the stuff that I would get, trying to follow certain things.
You know what?
And then
really, what really like put me on like reading regular stuff is that online Marvel had this app, and I cannot remember what it's called. This was like 2001, 2002, so maybe the first Spider-Man movie. There was a thing where you could just read comic books on your browser in complete form. So they had like Origin, they had Ultimate X-Men, they had Ultimate Spider-Man, they had like random issues of other stuff, but like specifically they had like the Ultimate comics. And so I was reading my comics on that because they put them out for free. And then that's what got me reading like the Ultimate series, because I just had it there. And like I can't imagine, all that stuff. Like back then, I had a terrible internet connection, so I had to wait for the whole issue to load. Yeah. So
see, I didn't do that, but you're reminding me of something that I did seek out and get around that time, because we were really late to have a computer at my house. I mean, I got a computer.
It doesn't show.
I got a computer for like high school graduation, and that was really like the first time that, I mean, I had like a Commodore 64 or something that was my grandparents that like I would play, actually a Spider-Man word game, where you're like, go west. But I never had anything that was like up to date that could actually do things. But, and I haven't thought about this since that time until you started talking about this, but they would put out these discs that you could get it just like, I don't even know, Target or Kmart or whatever, that were comics. But what they actually were they would take stills from the Filmation animated shows like Aquaman or Superman or something and put them into comic book form. And you could click through panel by panel, and each one would have a little bit of like hidden animation that you could do. So maybe you click on like Storm, Aquaman's seahorse, you click on his like little fin and it would flap. And some of them would actually be like a short clip from the episode, and they just blew my mind. I mean, I just thought this is like an amazing thing that I'm looking at right now. But I never actually like went to like DCComics.com and read comic books.
Yeah, I was often somebody who went to like the official webpage of a thing. I was like, I went to the X-Men movie
that was
main
not
webpage and like looking at all the like. When I was getting to X-Men, I had to be like looking at like, I looked at the Toad profile on the X-Men movie website, and it would be saying his powers. I'm like, those are Toad's powers, okay. Like
you just lock it away.
Yeah, until I got a copy of the Ultimate X-Men encyclopedia DK put out.
I do. There's certain things that I remember super well from when I was a kid. I mean, TV was really like, that was like the golden age, I feel like, of superhero animation, because I remember watching like the primetime premiere of Batman the Animated Series. I remember the X-Men series, which I was 100% into. So I would talk on my phone to my friend Brandon. We would watch the shows together, and there were 2 Fox channels, and one was slightly ahead. So we'd have it on the one where we could go back and rewatch the last like 10 seconds of a scene. And I still have not recovered from the shock of, spoiler alert, Morph dying in those early episodes, and spoiler alert, Morph's return. So those were just like crazy to me. But I remember really clearly the first time I bought a trade paperback, like on purpose specifically. Do you remember? Did you have one of these?
Paperback? It must have
been the
first
time, like a collection.
Yeah, it must have been Ultimate X-Men that I bought one. It must have been like the 12-issue hardcover, or because you know what changed in 2001? I got a job.
I see.
and I could buy comic books.
Yeah, Papa's bringing home the bacon now.
So yeah, I think that's what it was. I think it must have been the Ultimate books, and I think really it would be the summer of 2002 because that's when my summer job would have started earlier because I didn't get my first job until like July.
Okay.
So I would have been going further. So like the Spider-Man movie was coming out, so I was buying Ultimate X-Men's in their form because they were still relatively new, so it wasn't hard to pick up the back issues. But it was hard to pick up like the first 12 issues because they had sold out. So I got like Ultimate X-Men Volume 1, the hardcover 12 issues, and like the first 3 Ultimate Spider-Man trade paperbacks. So pretty sure those were the very first. And I think also I was buying the Essential X-Men's that I had read because those were being printed. Like I think the 3rd one was the newest one, and I was waiting for the 4th volume. When as I was reading them,
when I was in 4th grade, we had to bring in like a current event clipping from the newspaper or something we saw on TV.
I have a feeling I know where this is going.
And I brought in a thing about the death of Superman.
That's what I thought you were going to say.
And my teacher was like, that doesn't count. And I was like, it was on the news. And it was. Yeah. It was on like the local news. It was on like, it was a big deal. Like,
it sounds like this teacher is a problem.
She was. She really was. But the death of Superman today, I mean, you would not even cause a blip, really. But at the time, it was like a huge, huge deal. They covered it like someone was dying, you know. But it was huge. And I remember like all of the funeral for a friend arc. I remember all the like which one is the real Superman and going and collecting those different issues from the store. So that was really into.
I did get to live through something like that. When post Civil War, when they killed Captain America, it was a pretty big, like that was in the newspapers, and it was like a big deal. I remember, and I was reading stuff as it was right as the Civil War was ending, and I was like super into all that. So like, that was like, I think that's the only time like a character's died, and I was like reading the newspapers and stuff like, wow, this is a big deal. I'm sad. Yeah. And like I remember doing a toast to Captain America at my D&D group. We were like, the pizzas had just come, so we were like, to Captain America.
Yeah. The death of Superman, I mean, to me was like a huge, huge thing. When everybody came out, everybody was speculating on which one of these Supermen were real. Mm-hmm. You know, it was a whole thing trying to figure out like which one was a real Superman. And I remember this was also pivotal. Sorry, because Roger Stern put out a huge hardcover book chronicling this whole thing, and I got it and read it like cover to cover, and that was one of the first like big, massive adult books that I read.
Right.
But going back to how we started this conversation, my first trade was DC and Marvel's like crossover classics. It was $20. Oh yeah. And this was probably like 1994. And I was desperate for it. And I just couldn't even, like, how would I pay $20 for a comic book? That was crazy to me. And so I pined for it for a very long time. And finally, it was in my Easter basket one year. And it was like the greatest Easter present one could get. Wow. Not thematically relevant, but it was still, it was a huge deal. I absolutely loved it. I probably slowed down a little bit in college because unlike you, I didn't have a cool librarian there. Getting me comic books. So I think that was kind of my slowdown period. And then after college, I picked it right back up again.
College,
had some subscriptions.
I was buying comic books on a monthly basis, on a weekly basis before college, and going broke doing it because I was living on my own. There would be weeks where I'm like, I got food or comics, and I picked the comics. Yeah. I'm like, I'm not going to fall behind on this stuff. I was spending way too much money. It was a problem. And then I started college, and I just had to stop. I just couldn't buy them anymore. I had a pull list for about a month or so, and I had to call them up like, I can't do it. Yeah. And I didn't really read comics for a few years during that until I realized I could interlibrary loan them through the library's program, and then I could get like 12 trade paperbacks at a time, and I used that to catch up in a big way.
Oh, you did. I recall that very well.
So, and not just because it dawned on me, it's like, oh, I don't just have to catch up on the things I was reading. I can catch up on everything.
Yep. That's what happens. That's what I'm in right now. Why don't we transition into some of the things that we're reading right now?
Yeah.
So I've had the DC app. like pre-ordered, if you can even. I did. I signed
no,
up.
I
Like
was there. Yeah, I saw
before
you do it.
that even came out, and I was very excited about that, about reading those comics. And if you'll recall,
Yeah,
what a crap
sure.
selection was there to begin with. And
Yeah,
it wasn't until they did that like major dump where you could actually read things
yeah.
that it finally felt like it was money's worth. So I used that to basically finish New 52. And ended up really loving the Superman stuff in that. We could talk about Superman Truth sometime, because that's one that I definitely want to go back and read that whole arc again, because I just loved it. But I used the DC app to finish that. I used it to go back and read all of the like classic Mike Grell Green Lantern run, like those 100 issues. No, sorry, Green Arrow.
Yeah.
Reading through classic Green Lantern. I think Green Lantern Archives #3. And then I've been making a pretty good dent in Rebirth, following some different online sites telling you like a good reading order, trying to like keep the character storylines intact, because it's tricky. It's tricky. It's a lot easier not reading in trade paperbacks, but actually reading issue by issue, because you can follow storylines a little bit easier that way. So right now I'm in the midst of the 3rd volume of All New Superman, with written by Gene Yun Lang, who wrote a lot of the Superman Truth stuff that I really liked. So I've been enjoying New Superman quite a bit. This is where the Chinese government sets up their own Superman, Batman, Wonder Woman, and classic Superman, Batman, Wonder Woman, particularly Superman, mentors a little bit. I just think that's been a really unique story, and a nice way to tell characters that sort of have the Superman feel, that are different, and you're not doing the same things over and over again. So I've been using the app for that. And then over on the Marvel app, which I got really thanks to you, and during this during the quarantine time, as we are now, to pick up the Hulk run that I read. But I'll get into that in a minute. What are you up to at the moment?
I guess right now I'm reading New Mutants by Chris Claremont and Mick Lloyd is the artist, but it became Buscema. Anyway, Chris Claremont's New Mutants, which started in Marvel's like graphic novel Volume 4, which is like the series where they were like, let's do some graphic novels, and they put out God Loves Man Kills in that format. So they used it as like the origin for New Mutants. And as much as I love the X-Men, and as much X-Men stuff as I've read, New Mutants is not a thing I've ever read, mainly because I just wasn't interested, and also I don't think the essential volumes had started putting them out, and that's how I was reading the older stuff growing up. But yeah, I've recently caught up with what's on Marvel Unlimited, so I was like, let's go back and see. And New Mutants then is, I mean, it's the first time the X-Men series like spun off. Yeah. So it's where I decided to start.
It's been a while since I've read those, and I haven't read that series too far. But I remember it not being a particularly strong start. Has that been your experience?
I mean, I'm reading it at this moment, and so I'm a couple of issues in. I mean, it's just your mileage is going to vary on how you handle Chris Claremont's writing, his writing of kids. I mean, New Mutants was positioned as refocusing, like, certain editors wanted the X-Men to be about the school. It was supposed to be about mutant students in the school, and Chris Claremont's like, no, the X-Men are doing other things now. And so they kept kind of pushing that, and so New Mutants really became, that's what it was. They're not supposed to be superheroes. They're supposed to be mutant students in the school, and that's supposed to be the status quo. So, like, if you're going in expecting X-Men level adventures, at least in these first couple issues, it's not there. Like, they still deal with stuff. I mean, Sentinels show up in issue 2, I think it was. So, like, that stuff is there, and I think the series gets a little bit more off the wall as it goes on, but it's different,
a little too. I remember, I mean, they're so married to those, like, X-Men uniforms at this point, that I felt it was also kind of hard with all new characters as well. It's interesting that they didn't like layer in some existing characters to make the transition a little easier. you know.
I mean, Karma was in other, not Karma.
Oh,
Yes, Karma was in
okay.
other things, and I think, I mean, Magic had been in other stuff as well.
Okay. Well,
Ileana, but yeah, I mean, Cannonball and Sunspot and Danielle Moonstar, they were all just showing up for the first time there. Wolfsbane. But yeah,
yeah,
I
I'm
mean,
just surprised. I'm surprised we didn't get like a marquee character outside of like Professor X.
well,
A
they're all
marquee
younger,
character.
yeah.
Yeah, but someone to sort of be in the mix, and then you can have that person sort of be your lens into these new characters. I feel like
Well,
me
Landra
as a
of the
reader.
Shi'ar is hanging out with, but you know what? That's the thing.
Yeah,
There are people who
sure.
New Mutants would be like this was a new series. This might be
Yeah,
their first comic, might be their first X-Men comic. So like those marquee
that's true.
characters wouldn't even mean anything to them. There are people like I've talked online before. I'd be streaming on Twitch and we'd be talking about X-Men comics, and I've had people just be like, "Oh, I used to be big into the New Mutants in the '80s," and like
Hmm.
it was just kind of like a weirder
Yeah,
offshoot, and
it's definitely weird.
I don't think it
Well,
necessarily
I think
meant you had to read X-Men.
yeah, well, you make a good point there. We've interviewed a lot of people, a lot of comic book artists over on the All the Book show, and it seems like in some way, not in so many words, but I think everybody has kind of come around to saying something along the lines of every comic could be someone's first
Yeah.
comic, and so that's kind of part of the rubric when they're writing, which I think is interesting and in a challenging way to tell a story too when you think about that.
But yeah, I'm liking it because I've read all the Chris Claremont X-Men, so it's
Yeah.
nice to kind of, I mean, 1984, I think it is, so it's like you're starting, or 1982, it's early 80s, but we're, like, that era is still kind of fresh, there's still kind of, things are still kind of new and happening, so, yeah, I mean, Legion hasn't even shown up, but they've mentioned him, so I'm like, all right,
Okay.
let's do this. So, stuff I've known about, but just haven't ever read, so... Gotta
I'm
fix
reading
that.
a little X-Men now. I started, as I was saying with the Marvel app there. I got on that because I'd started reading the Jeff Lubb, Ed Guinness Hulk run of what is that, like 2010,
Something
2011
like
when
that.
those
Yeah.
those were going out. And at at a certain point, the story weaving through multiple books just became so hard to follow. And I caught up to the point where they were too new that I couldn't get them through the library anymore. And I kind of
Right.
just stopped reading that in 2013, but I always really liked it. I was curious how it went. So I was looking at ways to get that in trade form. And then finally, you were just like, just get the app, Grandpa.
Yeah.
And so I did.
Yeah. Well,
And
the
so I
app is
start.
how I caught up on all the X-Men stuff, but also
Yeah.
the reason I'm reading the New Mutants because they finally filled out like the last missing issue. So now like all 100 issues of New Mutants are on the app.
Did you
So
ever get the rest of your Gambit run? I know that was your
they did
white
finally
whale.
put up the 1991-2001 Gambit
Good.
series. That was my white. Now it's like all the other X-Men spin-offs that they didn't do. That not all
Yeah.
of Gen X is there, not all of X Factor's there, not all
Okay.
of X Force is there. It's like just do it.
Yeah.
But they've
Yeah.
slowed during quarantine. They've like stopped doing the back issue stuff, so they don't know,
Yeah.
and they don't know when it's going to come back. It's a bummer.
Yeah. Well, this has been helpful for me because I did finish that run. I picked
Yeah.
up sort of in the Fall of the Hulks, World War Hulks
Mm-hmm.
era of that, and continued on, really following Red Hulk. And
You
I
love
I
that
know
Red Hulk.
I know that, and that's not a popular character, right? People don't like Red Hulk,
I
do
don't
they?
know what the general consensus is on Red Hulk. I take or leave him.
Well, I guess what I was liking about it in right in the aftermath of all of that was that like Banner had just had so much baggage, just like everything with Ross and Betty, and I feel like the Banner Hulk stories of that time had just become really like weighted with those kind of issues. And so you start with Red Hulk being a mystery, and because of that, it felt a lot more like classic, like early days Hulk, and it was just a lot more like carefree and colorful, and that's sort of what I wanted. So I got hooked on that, and then you do find out more about Red Hulk. He has very
Mm-hmm.
similar baggage. How do you want to be about spoilers? Let me ask you that. Should we? I mean, I'm talking about a 10-year-old comic here. Do I need to?
I don't know. Yeah, spoilers. Spoilers for
Okay.
everything. From
I'm
now
gonna- I'm
on,
gonna say who
spoilers
Red
for
Hulk is.
everything.
I'm gonna say who Red Hulk is. So
Here it comes.
if you care,
Spoilers in 1. Wait. Spoilers in 3, 2, 1. Spoiler.
I'm less interested in the parts that are dealing with him being like Thunderbolt Ross.
Mm-hmm.
I like it a lot more when he is just like when Captain America is sending, or Steve Rogers, I guess he's sort of not Captain America at this point. When Steve Rogers is sending the Red Hulk out on pretty much Suicide Squad-esque missions to just go out there, I really liked that arc. When you're dealing a little bit more with like him and Betty or him and Banner, then I feel that weight sort of coming back. But I was following Red Hulk. And then I had to message you and say, wait a minute, this volume is talking about Red Hulk being part of the Avengers. Like, what is that? Where is that? And so then I had to go and pick up Avengers, and then I had to go and pick up New Avengers, and then I had to pick up Secret Avengers, which I'd already started reading. And then I was leading up to X-Men Schism, so I had to pick up some X-Men Schism stuff. And then I had to follow on into Avengers versus X-Men because I was reading all the Avengers, and that's what happens now, to the point where my like to read library is just massive, and I'm just going through. I'm pretty much like a time traveler at this point, where I'm reading exclusively like 2011 Marvel comics, and that's so that's where I am now. And I feel I really liked the first Bendis Avengers volume, and I've not liked it really since. I think New Avengers with Luke Cage's team is just a complete mess from start to finish. Secret Avengers I kind of like. I just got into the Rick Remender stuff. And I am kind of liking that still. And I'm still liking the Hulk title. Yeah. What do you mean I don't like weird things?
Well, sometimes things get like too weird for you.
Oh, well, that's not why I don't like New Avengers, though.
No, I'm talking about Rick Remender's Secret Avengers.
Oh, you don't think I'm going to like that in the long run?
We'll see. It does get pretty weird at times. His Uncanny Avengers gets real weird, but I love it.
I can already feel it getting strange.
Yeah.
So I do really like that, but that got me into, because the Secret Avengers that I just read has the original Human Torch in it, which I've always sort of like known there is an original Human Torch, but I don't know anything about that Human Torch. But I was really intrigued by his placement in this. So fill me in. Tell me.
I mean, I don't know enough about him, but isn't he part of the Vision? Isn't the Vision's lineage?
I haven't got any of them.
Yeah, I think the Vision, like his body or something, goes back to the original Human Torch. But I could be wrong, because I don't know nothing about the Vision.
All right. Well, so far, all I've read with the original Human Torch is Secret Avengers, but there is a whole Torch miniseries. And, I mean, he was in Marvel Comics #1, which we actually saw a physical copy of Marvel Comics #1.
At the Pop Culture
Seattle
Museum in Seattle,
Seattle. That was great. So I'm going to go back and read that Torch miniseries, and then I'm going to read some Invaders to get a better sense of that character, because I was intrigued by him in Secret Avengers.
Nice.
Yeah. What else you got going on? You working through? I know you're sort of working through old New Mutants. What like lines are you straddling as far as what series are you following at the moment?
Well, that's the thing. I'm not following too much, so that I've been kind of going through. The reason I was picking up New Mutants is because I was like, all right, let's go fill in some of the X-Men gaps I've got. And one of those, which we talked about on our show, the All the Books show, was the X-Men Grand Design series, which is by Ed. Boy, I should really have these guys' names. There we go. Ed Piskor. It's this X-Men retelling of the X-Men history, starting from like the very beginning. So not even like X-Men 1, starting like way back in the beginning. And his art style is very indie comic, American Splendor, Ghost World kind of style, like that. Really, it's retro, but it's weird kind of setting. And very like boxy, like all the panels are smaller as it's going through, and it's basically trying to take the X-Men history and condense it into one history that makes sense, to make it feel like it's a cohesive universe from the start. And it's successful when it's covering most of the stuff before Chris Claremont started writing, but because like that stuff has retcons and is a mess, and some decisions like they killed Professor X and then later decided they didn't want him dead, and all this different stuff. And also, like, you know, Magneto didn't have his origin in the Holocaust until Chris Claremont showed up, and so they kind of start integrating all that, and that helps like the earlier stuff. But then when you get to the Chris Claremont, you have one guy writing the X-Men for 17 years.
Long run.
It's pretty much, you know, it's pretty much cohesive. I mean, it's still kind of messy at points, but it's a lot more focused than the earlier stuff. So it kind of seems like at first it's redundant, but as the series goes on, it gets weirder, and you start realizing this isn't a straight retelling, and that we're in a different timeline, and things are different. And here comes the spoilers for X-Men Grand Design. You start realizing, oh, we're in a timeline that's leading to the Days of Future Past. So we're following what takes us to Days of Future Past, and then it reverses. And so now the Claremont run that we know, like the certain things that happen, is more the normalized X-Men that we've been reading.
Oh, okay.
So,
that's very ambitious.
It is ambitious, and I think that's an interesting choice to do if you're stopping at the Claremont era, because that's what he does. He does a lot of characters aren't in there, but he stops basically at the Claremont run, leading up and then reversing it, which is how he kind of gives this X-Men like an ending. But by doing that, like the exercise of making the X-Men cohesive in terms of their history, like, okay, you got the Chris Claremont stuff, which seems like, oh, it's there, but in the 90s it becomes kind of a mess, and it seems like that it would have been nice to see that project keep going and streamline things where they really start going off the walls and retcons really start going through the roof. So yeah, an interesting project. I don't know if it necessarily is successful. There's some gags in there that are just visual that crack me up, or just these throwaway gags. Just sometimes like it's a big event, but it's just a small panel. It's just Wolverine going like, "Look out!" and like that kind of stuff kind of cracks me up. But yeah, it was interesting. I mean, the thing is, I recently have read through the Chris Claremont 80s material.
Yeah.
So reading this,
I was here for the whole journey.
Yeah, reading that, it was just kind of like going straight through again in X-Men Grand Design. I'm like, oh boy. Just reread the Australia Times and all that stuff. So
I'm in a weird place, I feel like, X-Men wise too, because the 2011 stuff I'm reading is where it's split between Uncanny and Wolverine and the X-Men. And so far I've not really been a big fan of either title. I feel like, I don't know, the Cyclops team is very like heavy and sci-fi, and the Wolverine stuff that I've read so far is just kind of off the wall. Just weird. Okay, so
I loved Wolverine and the X-Men. Jason Aaron's 8 volumes of Wolverine, 7 or 8 volumes. I loved it. Tons of fun. A lot of ridiculous stuff. It kind of focuses on the students a lot of times, which I liked. I liked following those students. It kind of made Quentin Quire fun again, and I had a good time. I was sad when it ended. It was a nice run. I thought it kind of took a dip in quality for the 2 volumes. It had a focus on Avengers versus X-Men, but just the stuff it was doing, I was like, this is good. This feels cohesive. I like it. Uncanny X-Men. What's his name? The writer, Gillen.
Oh, okay.
What is it?
I think
all right. Right. Anyway, the Cyclops led Utopia team of the Uncanny X-Men right after the Schism series. It is a little ridiculous, but once Mr. Sinister shows up, I was totally on board, because then things get real wacky.
See, I was not a fan of that that take on Mr. Sinister.
Oh, well,
that turned me off,
because there's some people who are big fans of that, and it's kind of like during the House of X, Powers of X thing, it's the Mr. Sinister he pulls from. Actually, it seems like what's his name? Not Rick Remender, the guy writing the House of X stuff. You don't have to
I haven't read that stuff.
Yeah, you don't have to tell me his name. I don't. Hickman, Jonathan Hickman. It seems he was a big fan of Jason Aaron's Wolverine and the X-Men, because he seems to be using those characters like Kid Gladiator and whatnot. But yeah, the Mr. Sinister thing, kind of taking him from just like the super serious, mysterious geneticist who shows up behind a tree every now and then to say something cryptic, has been replaced with the goofy off the wall guy who's like, "Where did you get that hat?"
It's very strange. Yeah. It's Kieran Gillen, by the way, who did Uncanny X-Men that run.
I confuse him with the I confuse the name with the actress who plays Nebula.
Well, what a good transition! I just rewatched Guardians of the Galaxy.
Yeah, That's a good
Yeah.
transition.
We've been like slowly watching through the Marvel movies again, and by slowly I mean like over the last several years. We're like, oh, we're doing this. Let's do it. So I watched Guardians of the Galaxy again. My feelings didn't particularly change about it. I
Ugh.
wouldn't put it in my listen. I
Listen, I
I
didn't say
get
anything. I just said, huh.
I know that. I get it. It's just not a personal favorite. It's not that I think it's bad. It's nothing like that. It's just not a personal favorite. Here's one
Coming
that
out
I
all
did have a
stops on
major.
episode number 1 here.
Here's one that I did have a major turnaround on, though.
Mm-hmm.
I've said for years that I needed to rewatch this movie because I saw it once in theaters, and I don't even remember what the situation was. But we had a terrible day, and it was like, should we just skip this, or should we just do it? And we're like, we're here, let's just do it. And that is how we watched Captain America: Winter Soldier. And since that time, I've thought to myself, I don't like that movie. We just rewatched it, and I really liked it.
Yeah, I love it.
I thought it was great, and I was really happy about that because, it was just I love First Avenger. I mean, Civil War is great. I love his portrayal of Captain America, and everybody loves this movie, and I was really pleasantly surprised by that. And I loved the score. Do you remember the score for this one?
Yeah, I own this score.
I own the score too.
Yeah.
After I watched it, I was like, I have to have this, and so I went and found it and downloaded it.
I love the 9-minute track that's called Captain America.
I do too.
It's kind of the one I put on now. It's
Yes.
it's not too dissimilar. I think it was kind of used as a temp track for Mad Max when they did the Band of Brothers music or whatever it's called. But yeah, I love Winter Soldier is probably in my top. I mean, it's in my top 3. I think it might be my favorite one.
It just moves really well.
Yeah.
I just feel like they hit the spots just right, and it's just it's such an interesting because it's an espionage movie, really. I mean, it is like 3 Days of the Condor, whatever. I don't remember.
That's what. We watched that one, 3 Days of Condor.
One is the book. I think is 7 Days of the Condor.
Yeah,
I always confuse
7 days is too long. You want 3 days for the Condor.
That's better. But yeah, so I downloaded that soundtrack, and I've never read a ton of Captain America, and so using the Marvel app, I went back to the early Stan Lee, Steve Ditko days.
Okay.
And started with Captain America 100. That's where the title changes from Tales of Suspense to Captain America. So that's if you're looking for a collection of that's Marvel Masterworks Captain America Volume 3.
So they don't start with the him coming back for the first time, which is in Avengers 4 or something?
Well, see, Captain America is like the lead character in the last, I want to say, 40 or so issues of Tales of Suspense.
Okay.
And so the issue 100, where it's like officially this title is called Captain America, it resumes the Tales of Suspense numbering, but with a new title.
Okay, yeah. They did that with everything. Iron Man and Doctor Strange and Thor. They were all different series, then they took over, and then they became their own. And like if you're reading it on like the Marvel app, you have to go back and find those titles.
Exactly. Yeah. So I didn't bother with that. I just started at the first issue of Captain America, which is issue 100. And they do give you a pretty thorough retread of the Captain America origin. So it does work as a starting point. Yeah. But every time I go back and read Marvel from this era, I'm just struck by how much better it is than DC of that era. Yeah. Because DC is it's fun. Yeah. It's goofy. Like, I understand why as a kid picking up a DC comic and reading it was more fun than picking up like an issue of Spider-Man where he's like so real and talking about like his real insecurities and all that. Whereas, Superman is like pushing planets around. Yeah. It's in that way, I get why it's appealing for kids. It's just like a one-off. But I've been trying to read through Showcase Presents Robin, and I love Robin. Right. And I just hate it. I mean, it's so bad.
From what I've read of like Batman stuff, it seems like it's like he pretty famously like rebooted tone-wise in the 70s, and it just kind of seems like DC needed that decade to be like, oh, this Marvel trend is here to stay. Yeah. I mean, if they're the leading, Marvel was like nothing to DC anyways for a couple of years, a couple of decades. So then in the 60s, like DC's not just going to change things because Marvel had a good year with this Spider-Man and this Thor character. So yeah, I could see by the 70s like, oh my gosh, somebody quick, give Robert homework. Yeah. He needs homework.
It's true. It's true. I mean, you do see that happening, but it's so interesting to be going through like the early Captain America. So I'm in the early Green Lantern on DC. So I'm in like the mid 1950s there. And What's cool about it is that it leans very heavy into like pulp sci-fi. It's very much a science fiction title, and that's fun. But when you compare it to, not quite 10 years later, Captain America here, it's just amazing, the difference. Because when I'm reading through like old Green Lantern, it's like I do a couple and then I move on to the other thing. Because you just can't keep doing that kind of comic over and over again. But with Marvel, of like 60s Marvel or earlier, it's like you can, because it's really engaging and interesting.
Well, the thing that Stan Lee always said is that with like Fantastic Four, he just decided to start writing the stories he wanted to write and was a bit afraid to write. But then when you also think about it, like in the 60s, you're now getting the writers were kids in the 40s or 60s reading comics, and now they're bringing what they liked and adding to it. So you kind of get like people who grew up on comics know what was working, as opposed to just maybe where you're throwing everything against the wall, and now it's a little bit more focused, and like both companies benefited from that.
It's just amazing to me, like having gone right from watching Winter Soldier to reading Captain America 100 and in the volumes after that. It's interesting to see how much Winter Soldier owes to 1960s, like Stan Lee, Captain America, right down to like the characters it's using, Agent 13, Nick Fury, of course, but even with things like life model decoys, with Captain America's general disillusionment with S.H.I.E.L.D. and like government.
Well, that's
it's
a lot
all
of
right
Steve
there.
Englehart too.
That's true.
When we talked to Steve Englehart back on All the Books show, when we interviewed him, and we talked about his Captain America, his Secret Empire storyline, and that was a big thing. 70s for him. So like, all that stuff just went into Winter Soldier. Yeah, and my lizard brain.
It's just all right there.
My lizard brain just likes seeing Captain America jump off a helicarrier and get caught by Falcon.
Yeah.
So,
it's pretty cool.
Yeah.
So anyway, I mean, I plan on sort of bouncing back and forth between 2011 Marvel and some of this early Captain America stuff, because I really like it.
Yeah, my Captain America reading started basically during Civil War. I didn't really read the character because in the comics, I've never been too much of a fan of like Thor and Captain America, and like the movie versions I really liked, and so. I just don't care for like Thor being like, "Hark at thee, are thee a friend or foe with thee?"
Yeah.
And I guess I just never really thought. It wasn't until I started looking back, I was like, "Oh, Captain America's actually been doing this what do I stand for thing for a while. It's not just this Civil War era." So I had to be kind of retaught.
When I was a kid, when Captain America throws his mighty shield show. I don't know if that was in. Well, I mean, I don't know if that was in like syndication. I know that I had a VHS tape with episodes of that on there, but there was that, and then there was two movies that I feel like were like failed TV episodes. But it's Reb Brown is Captain America.
What's the one I watched?
Oh, the Matt Salinger Captain America. Okay. That's later. That's later. But I loved that as a child. Matt Salinger and Ned Beatty. That was a lot of the Captain America that I knew. That was one of the cartoon, and then that Matt Salinger like movie, which I don't even know. That has such a weird history. Yeah. It's like, did it even come out? I feel like they sort of canceled it, and then
you showed it to me, so it came out in some form.
Did you really hate it? You didn't like it at all?
It was pretty rough. Like Captain America wakes up and is in the back of a truck. He's just riding the road like a hobo, and just be like, "Oh man."
I've just seen it a million times, and I've seen it since I was a tiny little child. But that and those Reb Brown Captain America like TV movies is my history with Captain America. So I was familiar with all that, and was a fan of Bucky. I went as Bucky for Halloween when I was a little kid. My grandma made me a Bucky costume. No one knew who I was.
But was everybody was like, Captain America with you?
It's Robin. No, I was just Bucky.
So you went as Bucky solo.
Yeah.
Okay.
Does that surprise you?
No, it doesn't surprise me, but I could see why people were like, "Who the heck are you?"
They were very confused.
Yeah.
It was a great costume. My grandma really nailed it.
I went as my own superhero one year, so I can't say anything. I just wore a turtleneck with a fake logo that I made and a Zorro cape. Maybe it was a Darth Vader cape and a Zorro mask.
If you want to go even earlier than that, one year when I was little, like pre-K probably, I couldn't decide if I wanted to be Superman or an owl, so I went as Super Owl.
Yeah. Oh, you
So,
solved. Yeah, solved it.
to each his own.
Yeah.
All that to say, I'm really liking 60s Captain America, and I plan
Yeah.
to follow it
It's
along.
pretty groovy.
When Denny O'Neil passed away, I was looking at. I've read all of his DC stuff. There's probably a few things here and there that I haven't, but honestly, I don't think so. I feel like I've read it all. But I hadn't read any of his Marvel, and so I picked up. He starts writing Iron Man at issue 158, which is in the Iron Man Epic Collection, Volume 10, The Enemy Within. So I'm currently reading that. Like, I'm right in the midst of that. Those Epic collections are like 20 issues a set.
Yeah.
So
yeah,
I'm
they're
using
like
that
those. How I was saying, I got into X-Men reading the Essential X-Men, but those were all black and white. You get 2 years, like 24 issues worth with the annuals and any like story issues that were regular, but it was all black and white. And so the Epic collection, I believe they're pricier, but they're all in color.
Yeah, definitely they're pricier. So. And I should say, like, I'm using the trade paperback titles to mark progress on things like Goodreads and just to simplify it. But I'm reading all of these just individual single issues. Yeah. But this collection too, right away, doesn't pull any punches, you know. And of course, this is on the heels of Denny O'Neil and Neil Adams' Green Lantern, Green Arrow, which you know had crack addicted Speedy and like all of that stuff going on.
I learned it from watching you.
Yeah, so I shouldn't be surprised that it's heavy issues here. But right away, I mean, Tony's struggle with alcoholism, Rhodey taking over as Iron Man, like all of this stuff is just happening. There's a pretty great moment where Iron Man's drunk and like, I mean, that's not great.
Oh boy, yeah. That sounds great, Nick.
But he's like flying around in the suit, I think actually shattering any sort of like alcohol advertisers. And there's just like a one-panel cameo where Daredevil kind of flies into the shot and is looking around, and he's like, "What the heck?" And then he's gone, and that's it. And I was like, "That is priceless. I love that." Yeah. So that's my old Marvel.
Yeah, I like the Dennis O'Neil Iron Man. I read the Ironmonger and stuff. I'm sure there's plenty I haven't read. But yeah, the Obadiah Stane stuff is funny. I mean, especially the end, how it all wraps up. It's dark stuff.
Don't tell me.
Oh, you haven't read it yet. No. Oh, okay.
I've just read the issues that introduced Obadiah Stane.
I think this is the era when I started realizing I was like, oh, Iron Man has a pretty cool rogues gallery.
Yeah. Yep. So that's my classic Iron Man. You got anything else on the docket?
Yeah, I mean, you've been following me, like catching up on the X-Men comics and everything via the Marvel Unlimited app. Because I had gotten behind, and mainly it was because as House of X, Powers of X were coming out, I wasn't reading them, especially because, not just because I wasn't caught up, because they weren't on the freaking app. I would have had to buy them individual issues. And so I was just watching on Twitter as everybody was talking about what was going on. I'm like, God, it was just like, you know, stuck behind the fence because my mom won't let me play football with the other kids, which for good reason. I'm not good at football, and I'd hate it. But
boy. You'd break something so fast.
I think I would have. Yeah. I think I might have been better at soccer as a kid.
Yeah, probably.
So, soccer or track. Something that allowed me to run away from the problems. But yeah, I finally sat down and dug through them, House of X, Powers of X. You know, as I was like reading about stuff, what was happening, reading some of the spoilers, because I don't really care too much when things are spoiled. I'd rather just know what's happening. So I read House to Astonish, their X-Axis reviews. But I was reading, as I was reading House of X and Powers of X, I'm like, okay, I'm prepared not to like this. Sounds too weird. Sounds too out there. I just want my traditional X-Men. But for the past couple years, traditional X-Men has been really kind of crappy and redundant and not really engaging. And suddenly I'm like, you know what? I'm digging it. I have to kind of accept that this is almost like a reboot in some ways. But it's really just this like bizarre sci-fi tale that's using all the established X-Men canon and characters and powers and stuff to do all its crazy sci-fi ideas. Okay. I mean,
is it working?
Yeah, this 12 issue kind of series worked for me. It's not as much of a character piece. Like Moira McTaggart gets a lot of character work in here. Xavier and Magneto, but it's really just a lot of world building and planting seeds for things to come. Like if you just read these 12 issues in like the hardcover that it's in, it does kind of tell a story, but it's very much like the prologue of the story that's to come. So I don't trust Jonathan Hickman to nail the landing. I hope he surprises me. Maybe I'll be wrong. I hated his Avengers stuff, but I like the X-Men more, so maybe that's what's carrying me through. But yeah, just these crazy ideas, like Mother Mold is a giant space-based space station that creates master molds. All this the pods that are cloning dead mutants. All this different history, the stuff it's doing with Krakoa, like it's just big, and some of it doesn't necessarily fit perfectly with established X-Men history, especially the stuff with Moira McTaggart. But it's also just well done, and the art is gorgeous. So I had a good time reading it, but I read the first issue of X-Men by Jonathan Hickman that comes right after this, and I was a little less impressed. And I was like, all right, I'm gonna wait until like the trade paperback worth of issues are out and read it like that.
That's a good idea.
But it's part of my belief that I'm like, well, Jonathan Hickman can tell like this big crazy sci-fi story, but can he? It also didn't have an end. Can he tell the end? So
I know I read at least his first batch of Fantastic Four.
Yeah, I never gotta read his Fantastic Four someday. But
I've heard lots of good things about that. People usually seem to like that. So I haven't read a ton of Fantastic Four that I've enjoyed anyway. I started liking Ultimate Fantastic Four, but and even some of the early, like for younger reading level, the Marvel Age Fantastic Four was kind of fun. But outside of that, like Thing miniseries from like 10 years ago, has not really been a Fantastic Four run that I would point to and say I loved this. But I did love that Thing miniseries. That was great.
Yeah. So yeah, I mean, I'm on board. I'm waiting for more issues to come to the Unlimited app because they're on like issues 2 and 3 of these series. Yeah. So I'm excited to read Marauders. I'm excited to read X-Men.
Is it monthly? Like the new one is every month?
Yeah, the new one's. It's where like the series like was done. They stopped doing the series and they did House of X and Powers of X on alternate schedules, and then that ended, and so now they've launched their like 6 series or something. Okay. So I'm waiting for those to like catch up so I can like read them in chunks.
Okay. That makes sense.
But yeah, like sitting down and reading, I was like, cool. Now I'm in the know, but also I enjoyed it more than I thought. I think I gave it like 4 stars on Goodreads.
Yeah.
So yeah.
Cool.
I mean, also the art was just real pretty. Delicious.
Do you want to talk with me about Cyborg for a minute?
I will listen to you talk about your Cyborg comics. You've read quite a bit compared to my none.
Yes. So Cyborg, I think it's an interesting history, I would say, because he's created in 1980. He debuts in DC Comics Presents number 29, created by Marv Wolfman and George Perez, as part of that new Teen Titans redo with Starfire and the gang. I knew him from the Super Friends. Again, he was just a member of the Super Friends in Galactic Guardians. I think that was the last version of Super Friends that existed. But I still consider him a Teen Titans character, even though how long has he been a part of the Justice League? I mean, Super Friends has him part of the Justice League in '85.
Wasn't he like officially Justice League member? New 52 on, like just issue 1 of New 52, or I mean, I think there was that one where they formed right after Infinite Crisis, and I don't remember if he was in it or not. I think they decided no at the time, but yeah, I'm not the DC guy. You're the DC lore guy, so. But I remember.
Well, it's just
New 52, issue 1. He's like in the Justice League.
He's got, for a character with a 40-year history, I feel like he doesn't have a good run of supporting a lot of solo titles.
Yeah.
And everyone that I've read, so there's 3 main, that if you want to do this, there's really 3. There's the Teen Titans Spotlight Cyborg, which is by Mark Sable, and there was also a Teen Titans Raven. This is about the worst Cyborg story that there is, I feel like. It is just so messy and busy, and the story's nonsensical. It's just terrible. So much so that I just donated my copy to the library.
Snap. So, all right.
I know. Then we move into the New 52 Cyborg, which is actually what I just finished. After reading the Cyborg Teen Titans miniseries, I was like, I don't think I want to read a Cyborg standalone title again.
Right.
So I actually skipped it in New 52. But as I was reading single issues in Rebirth, I got to stuff where Cyborg was tying in. So I did read Cyborg in its entirety. So they put out 3 volumes with the 4th one set to come out. But they canceled the series pretty abruptly. And I want to say issue 23. And it's like right dead smack in the middle of a story, and it ends with like this stuff's going to be happening in the next issue, and there's nothing else. That was written in the majority by John Semper Jr. Then Kevin Graveau takes over towards the end, and it seems like he's starting a new arc, but then he's gone, and Marv Wolfman, Cyborg's creator, comes and writes the last few volumes of this issues of this before it gets canceled. The new 50 or the Rebirth run, I think, struggles with what a lot of Cyborg stories, whether it's Smallville or the Justice League movie, really anything besides like Teen Titans, the series, or the DC Universe movies, the animated movies. They just bog him down with this, like, he doesn't want to be a machine, and he has issues with his dad for turning him into a machine.
Yeah, well.
No, I know, but it's like it's 40 years, you know.
Listen,
like I would rather
have a story. If my dad wanted to turn
that.
me into a cyborg machine, I'd probably be fine.
Great, yeah. I mean, if it's that or dead, sure, I'd see that's what you'd pick. But
I mean, I was building a bookcase, and when I went to go lift up one of the sides, my back hurt so bad I had to go lie down for 40 minutes, and then just get in the hot bath and wait until the pain was gone. So I wouldn't mind becoming a cyborg now. Give me that cyborg back.
Definitely.
Be the nicest thing my dad.
The rebirth cyborg struggles a little bit, and sometimes it's just, it has a weird identity because sometimes it's telling more grounded stories set in Detroit. But I told you this before we were talking outside of this. There's in the middle there.
It's crazy to put Cyborg in Detroit because that's where RoboCop is from.
Yeah.
They better be alluding to that.
I don't think so.
They never mention that RoboCop, one of the most famous cyborgs, is from Detroit in the Cyborg book in Detroit.
It's just frustrating to me that so far in the Rebirth run, in its entirety, really, it's like they struggle to just tell a story that uses Cyborg. They feel like they have to, like there's one where someone is controlling rats, and I don't even remember why. And he's like literally being eaten alive by rats. And then the next issue transitioned to him being stuck in an 8-bit video game that he and his friend made when they were children.
Oh.
And the friend is like trying to destroy him.
Okay.
Which could have been a fun story.
See, I was like, that's the issue I want to read, not the one with the rat king from Ninja Turtles.
I agree with you. But that is just like over and done. And tonally coming out of like the rat storyline and then moving on to more like weird. It's just, it never quite finds what it's meant to do. When Kevin Graveau takes over, which is collected in volume 3, it actually does get a little bit more tonally. It makes a little bit more sense, but he doesn't have enough time to do it. So I feel like both the Teen Titans Spotlight Cyborg series and the Rebirth Cyborg are just bad, unfortunately. I mean, the later volumes of Rebirth get a little better. But weirdly, I think the new 52, just 12 issues, 2 volumes by David F. Walker, is actually pretty good. Like
That's
you
the
do
one
have
with that kind of gross green cover, though.
Yes, yeah. The second volume they used a John Romita cover, which is kind of cooler. But that one, even though you do have, it's really tied to like we have to tell a cyborg story, and you have some dad stuff. Overall, I feel like the character has a little bit more like self-confidence and is able to just like do what he needs to do.
You should have self-confidence. You got the power of machines.
That's what I'm saying. And that's what makes him such a fun and compelling character in the Teen Titans animated series, whether it's the more serious one or Teen Titans Go, is that Cyborg just is that and like leans into it, which is great, you know. The Rebirth run, though, I would, if you're a Cyborg fan or you want to read more Cyborg, I would say go to the Rebirth. Avoid the Rebirth stuff. Go to the New 52 stuff because it's just 12 issues. There's a pretty cool crossover with Shazam in the second volume where Shazam and Cyborg team up for a couple issues because the government is trying to like say, I know, the government's trying to say they own Cyborg because of the technology that's like running him, and Shazam and Cyborg team up to put a stop to that. And it's just cool. I like it. And maybe it's because I love Shazam.
100% believe that plot line.
But you do? You think that's true?
Yep.
Yeah. Okay. Anyway, so I guess my point of bringing this up is I've now read every single issue devoted to Cyborg as a solo character. Yeah. And for what it's worth, my recommendations are Rebirth. Right. And you don't need to read the other stuff. New 52. Yes, why do I keep doing that? New 52.
Yeah.
New 52.
You know, I've talked plenty about X-Men already, but the X-Men suffer from that where they constantly try to give certain X-Men solo series and just don't seem to realize that these X-Men were created first in the team, and so they were created to work in a team. But Cyborg didn't show up first in the team, right? He showed up by himself.
Well, he kind of gets a little preview, but then his real like proper debut, I think, is probably in the pages of New Teen Titans.
Okay.
But the thing is, it's like Cyborg doesn't have to just do like technology things.
But it seems like the technology stuff would make him even more capable of holding a solo series in the year 2020.
I agree with you, but I think the way they're telling technology stories is always with Cyborg as the victim. It's always somebody trying to like get Cyborg's, operating systems or trying to get control of Cyborg. It's never like there's a threat and Cyborg is going to go and address the threat. He's always under attack, which I just don't think makes for a great ongoing story. An arc, definitely, but a full like 24 issues or what, I just don't think so. So. But New 52 is fun and has Shazam, so.
All right. Yeah. You like a good Shazam appearance.
Yep. And that's pretty much where I'm at.
What you reading?
I think I've caught you up with everything that's going on in my life so far. And now I can say that I really like Captain America Winter Soldier and recommend the soundtrack by Henry Jackman.
Yeah, I love the soundtrack. The soundtrack I bought also came with what?
That is not a universal thing. Have you seen this? A lot of the reviews for that soundtrack are really negative. I was surprised because I loved it.
I think it borrows a bit from like the Dark Knight kind of style of music.
I heard that, but it didn't really stand out to me.
I really liked it. It was one of those soundtracks when like watching it, I was like, I like this music.
Me too. So every step of the way.
It doesn't that doesn't necessarily happen every MCU movie. For me, a lot of times it's like, boy, that's very big. Like I like a track from like the Doctor Strange soundtrack, but not like everything in it. But Winter Soldier, I just like that main string riff.
I think the only two that I actually own the full albums are Winter Soldier and The Incredible Hulk.
I think really it's just Winter Soldier for me.
Okay.
The soundtrack that I own. I own other I own like the X-Men soundtracks and some other ones. The Batman Begins Dark Knight stuff, but MCU wise, I think it's just kind of like, oh, I like that main track, like that main theme of this film. So yeah,
the movie actually does include some of the Alan Silvestri stuff from First Avenger, but the score doesn't have any of that on it.
Yeah,
so,
you hear it a little bit like when he starts jogging.
Yeah,
and they bring that in, so that's nice.
I guess that would be like one complaint that I would have
that
liked
was a complaint you had in Endgame. Captain America stands alone, and you hear Falcon say "on your left," and you're like, what was that? But that's in Winter Soldier.
Yeah, you're right.
Now you can connect those.
Now
things.
It'll make more sense to me.
Thing, yeah.
Yeah, cool.
So, yeah.
All right. Anything else you want to talk about?
No. Though I think we both have like a little thing planned each. I didn't tell you what I was gonna do.
Oh.
So, but I know what you're gonna do.
Well, why don't you go first?
Okay.
Or would you like me to?
No. Listen, I don't know how long this is gonna go. Tomorrow's promised to no man. So, but I've read enough Batman graphic novels that I can do this for a little bit. So I've just picked a Batman graphic novel that I've read in the past just to talk about. This is my Batman recommend.
Nice.
Little section. Because I'm going to talk about other stuff most of the time, but I love me Batman. Batman's probably the one I've read the most of outside of X-Men. It's been like X-Men, Batman, maybe Spider-Man. And then
you're really unique that way. I think your love of Batman.
Yeah. No, not a lot of other people have read Batman comics.
Really, he's a niche character.
Yeah, he's finding his own with these new I don't know what is he on, sneakers these days?
Yeah,
so
he's everywhere.
No, but so I picked Batman No Man's Land this time because when you were talking about like what was the first comics you read and stuff, and I was saying X-Men and stuff, the first Batman comic I ever bought. Out because like Batman I knew from the animated series and Justice League cartoon and certain other things in like the movies, but the first time I ever read a Batman comic was I picked up volume 1 of Batman No Man's Land. And I was a little lost at the time because like all I knew, this would also be the first time I bought a DC Comics comic.
Wow.
So I can't even tell you what year this is when I bought this.
That seems like a terrible introduction.
This is like 2002, I think, maybe when I bought this. I just got into it and like reading it, I'm like, whoa, these characters aren't like in the animated series. Like this isn't what Clayface is like and all that stuff. But the first volume just kind of sets up this. Gotham has gone the earthquake. You know, it's a famous storyline, so I'm not picking a deep cut here. But Gotham has had an earthquake, and and all the villains are loose and have carved up special places and everything. And it just kind of does this really cool post-apocalyptic kind of story within the Batman universe that, like, it's just kind of cool. Just this, it could be like an Elseworld tale in a lot of ways, if you wanted it to be. But because it's happening in the main universe, it has more weight to it and everything. But it just kind of creates, like, what if Batman was in a Mad Max kind of setting in a lot of ways. And, you know, as the story goes along, things get bigger characters show up. But it was an exciting read back then for me. It's just fun seeing, like, the villains in these, like, unique set doing different things, like leading gangs and how they'd interact in this new environment. And Batman has to, like, kind of redetermine what Batman means in this kind of situation.
This is what surprises me about, like, this being your intro to these characters, though, because the whole thing is that it's a paradigm shift. Well, so if you don't know the paradigm...
I think it helps that, like, the basic paradigm, to use your word, is, like, I'm still coming off the Batman animated series, so I still know, like, the basis of the characters. I still know the gist of the Riddler and Joker and Poison Ivy and all that stuff. And from the movies, I just don't know what, like, the comic book universe looks like. But in this, it's like, okay, I at least know who these characters are and everything. Now this is just... You know what? The first X-Men, like, back issues I started buying were the Age of Apocalypse series. So, and that was all alternative universe. But I just... It was just kind of... I really dug this post-apocalyptic vibe.
I mean, if you have the building blocks with the series, like the animated series and things, you should be able to do that.
Post-apocalyptic is kind of strong. I guess it's more like dystopian. I mean, it's just the land and rubble. It was really influential in some of my taste making there.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, the series goes on. Harley Quinn is introduced to the comics in this after the animated series. Joker becomes, like, the big one they have to stop. Lex Luthor gets involved. Bane shows up. I mean, it's just like, it's one of those comics that you want when you're first getting into Batman. Like, I like all these characters. What am I going to read? And, like, all the villains are just showing up throughout this storyline and at least doing something. Kind of the same way how, like, Long Halloween, you know you're getting a villain every issue. But it just kind of, like, as it went on, I'm like, this is just getting bigger. This introduced me to Huntress, and she became one of my favorite characters, both, like, in the Bat family, in the DC universe. So, yeah, this was a big one. I bought Volume 1... And I read that a few times, and then I had to, like, go out and get the other ones from my local comic book store.
That's like, what, 4 or 5 volumes, though, isn't it?
Yeah, it was 5 volumes when I bought it. I think they changed it recently, or maybe not even that recently. They made it bigger because the ones I had less comics than you get now. The ones you get now have, like, all those side titles. You get the ones that have Robin and Catwoman and Nightwing. I think mine were just focused on the Batman titles.
Okay.
And that probably did me a favor because it was a little bit leaner and more focused on what I was trying to read. Whereas Robin and Nightwing and Catwoman probably would have been, like, a bit too in the deep end for me at the time getting into it. So, yeah.
I got bad news for you, man. My coffee's cold.
Oh, yeah. Well, my water's gone.
I need to get one of those little...
Yeah. Hey, here's the thing that's going to drive you crazy. I've got a whole bunch of mugs in my house, right?
Okay.
But my wife keeps them in the dish cabinet.
All right.
We have a different cabinet for cups.
Okay.
But the mugs are kept above the dishes.
Okay.
Yeah, I just thought that might drive you a little nuts.
It's curious. I'd like to know more.
Yeah. All right, that's it. So, all right. What's your thing?
Well, Eric, as I told you, my start with comics, I owe a great deal to the quarter bin.
Yeah.
And I don't think that I've ever gotten rid of a comic.
Well, you said how much did you say you saved up for weeks for it? Was it $3, $3.50?
What? Yeah, the Phoenix one was $3.50. Yeah.
Wow. So, I mean, it was that's a whole lot of quarters.
Quarters at a time. Yeah.
I can't even tell you how many quarters that would be.
By the way, if Phoenix lived, not good.
Yeah, not good for anybody.
It's not good.
Not good
all.
for Cyclops.
But because that's the way that I started collecting comics, and because I don't tend to get rid of things, I have some of them just random off the wall comics. Some are cool, some make no sense. This one I picked especially because when we were talking about naming what we wanted to name this, you had suggested, because we were coming off of the All the Book show where we do our bookmark segment, you said Comic Book Marky Mark and the Funky Phantom.
Yeah.
So for my little ending thing here, I'm going to pull something from my quarter bin, take a look at it, and we'll decide if it's cool or not cool.
All right. Unfortunately, I know what this is already, so we'll...
Today,
yeah.
we're looking at... my quarter bin selection is Funky Phantom #2. This came out in 1972, put out by Whitman or Western Comics. There's no credited author or illustrator, so I can't tell you that.
Oh, no.
It does inside have the classic Sea Monkeys ad where you could send away.
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah. Some of those are horrendous.
Yeah. Yeah, they're but these ads, I mean, I've just seen them so many times, like the Strongman ad and stuff. It's just
Funky Phantom is Revolutionary War? Like,
yes.
That's his ghost? He's from the Revolutionary War?
Yeah.
Oh, boy.
Yes. Yep. So, if you don't know what Funky Phantom is, it's a Hanna-Barbera cartoon. Came out in 1971.
If you don't know who Funky Phantom is, don't tell us.
Don't even tell us.
Yeah.
Came out in 71, and it was in the mold of Scooby-Doo. There was a lot. There was like Goober and the Ghost Chasers. There was a lot of Scooby clones, Speed Buggy, that came out at the time.
Yeah, Jabberjaw.
Jabberjaw. This one is pretty close to Scooby-Doo. Only really, it's Funky Phantom himself who takes the place of Scooby-Doo. Voiced by Dawes Butler, just doing a straight Snagglepuss. He doesn't change it at all.
Yeah, I remember that.
Catchphrases and all. It's just Snagglepuss.
So here's the thing. Quarter bin, how old are you when you're buying this in the quarter bin?
I mean, I really don't remember before doing that. It's just been always.
When you're in the quarter bin, you're looking, and Funky Phantom's there. You're looking at Funky Phantom and choosing it from the quarter bin because you're a Hanna-Barbera / Funky Phantom fan already.
You know what? No, I don't think that I did watch Funky Phantom as a child, but I recognized Hanna-Barbera and it wasn't until I was a little older when it was, because I don't think there's not a lot of episodes of it. But yeah, I mean, I would recognize the Hanna-Barbera look and understand that it's like in the mold of Scooby-Doo. Mm-hmm. So the issue that we have here today, fun fact too, Mickey Dolenz of the Monkees voiced Skip on Funky Phantom. So if you're a Monkees fan, go over to the All the Book Show and listen to the time I interviewed Mike Nesmith.
Yeah.
And you could watch Funky Phantom, listen to Mickey Dolenz. So the issue that we have today here has the gang driving along in their little jalopy, and it's kind of a dumb jock kind of guy, and then sort of a mix of Shaggy and Fred, I would say. And that's Skip, and that's the one that's voiced by Mickey Dolenz. They're both interested in a girl that they have here. Mm-hmm. All right, they both have a crush on
the blonde.
There's no Velma Daphne. There's just one lady that they pal around with. They both want to date her. Okay, they have a dog, and then they have Funky Phantom and his cat Boo. And guess what? Funky Phantom's scared of ghosts.
Oh no,
he's a ghost.
How's he gonna get anything done? Yeah, he can't look in the mirror.
So in this one, the gang is traveling along in their little jalopy. They get a flat tire, and they need to go into town to get it fixed. But what town are they by? Sleepy Hollow.
Oh, no.
So that's scary.
Oh,
so
boy.
Right away, Funky Phantom is not about it. And they run into who they think is the Headless Horseman, but it turns out that it's just a descendant of Ichabod Crane. It's not a big deal.
Sleepy Hollow used to scare the living crap out of me as a kid.
Oh, me
the Disney
too.
one?
Yes.
Yeah, that was one of those ghost stories like past. But you know what? Yeah. It was one of the Are You Afraid of the Darks that I could handle as a kid. There was one with a ghost that taught a kid about reading that terrified me as a kid. But the Sleepy Hollow one, I dealt with. You know why? The kid from it was, I believe he was from Salute Your Shorts.
Oh.
So the tall, skinny one. I think he was also on Hey Dude. I don't know if it was the same actor. The point is, I recognize him from one of those shows.
All right. Well, in part 2 of The Headless Horseman Rides Again, the gang has to get to the bottom of this Ichabod Crane situation that's going on. Eventually, we meet some more people in the town. There's a guy and a girl who are friends with Ichabod Crane.
Sure.
Junior, you know. They're set to get married, but Ichabod Crane has a crush on the lady and wants to prove to her what a jerk this guy is. Okay. So he is actually the one who is dressing up as the Headless Horseman to get evidence about this guy. And he scares him so he can get access to his room, where he finds a letter to the woman that he's cheating with. And we find out that this villain is just trying to marry this lady because she's rich.
Oh, no.
Ichabod Crane uses this family lore to get to the bottom of it. And so everything's fine and the gang goes on their way.
Now this cover price is 15 cents.
Yeah.
So you actually bought this at a pretty good price. I mean, you ended up paying more. Yeah.
That did happen sometimes.
You
I
bought
did
it at
notice.
a loss. A 10-cent
You're
loss.
right. I did. Well, the value goes up. That's its investment.
Sure.
It's the way I look at it.
Yeah. So what's
Anyway,
you have like a bin in your house of just quarter bin comics?
I have 3 or 4 boxes.
And that's just filled with Funky Phantoms and Lois Lanes?
There's a lot of Lois Lanes in there. I was very into the Lois Lanes and the Jimmy Olsens.
The Jimmy Olsens, yeah, sure.
Of that time.
Mm-hmm.
But yes, there are some Hanna-Barberas in there. There's some, as I said, Rom the Space Knight.
Yeah, sure.
Just anything goes. So I'll just pull one out each.
Anything Ghost.
Were you interested in this Funky Phantom, or was this
not
a no?
particularly, no. I enjoyed the cartoons as a kid.
Yeah.
I think.
Yep.
So
I had a good time. I had a good time
Yeah.
visiting it. I'm not sad that I paid 25 cents.
Yeah, okay. Yeah. I was never much of the quarter bin kind of guy. I would spend a lot of time going through the back issues. But really most of the back issues I bought back then were X-Men comics, and it was like filling out Uncanny X-Men and X-Men, and then sometimes like solo series. But I didn't like, because a lot of the stuff I was buying was ongoing. Like if I was getting into Spider-Man or Moon Knight or something like that, I'd buy the ongoing. But there was never like, oh, I got to go buy the back issues of Spider-Man. It was just like, I need to fill out my X-Men.
See, for me, it was a quantity thing. Yeah. I loved reading comic books, and I wanted to have a lot of comic books. Yeah. So there would be ones that were up there for $1 or $2 that I wanted. Mm-hmm. Yeah. But it was kind of outweighed by, but this way I could have 4 Superman comics.
Hey, you know what? 1. I had the option of spending $20 to buy an unopened pack of Jurassic Park Pogs. I would have got 6 random Jurassic Park Pogs out of like 100 in the set. Or I could buy 100 Pogs for like $15. Random. So I chose the 100 Pogs. I wanted Pogs.
Way to go.
So maybe I would get Jurassic Park Pogs.
Quantity.
I didn't. Yeah.
Quantity.
So that was your quarter bin mentality, yeah.
There you have it.
So your choice was to buy basically 8 am I doing that right? No, I can't add 350. What's 350 in quarters? That's 4.
That would be
16, 14. Look, you know what? This isn't a math show. Shut up.
No.
So your choice was either buying 14 comics or What If Phoenix Had Lived?
Yes, exactly.
So that's a conundrum back then.
That's how I saw things at the time.
Yeah.
Yep.
I had like $10 every Sunday to go to my comic book store, and I brought a coupon that was buy 2 get 1 free.
Pretty good deal.
And so I would buy $10 worth of comic books and get that one free. And so comic books were like $3 at the time, so I could buy $9 worth of comic books and then get one free as well. So that's basically what I had. And it would be my X-Men titles, maybe Wolverine. And then once I started expanding the Marvel Universe, I'm like, this $10 isn't going to cut it anymore.
Nope. It's not going to do it.
Yeah.
It's not going to do it.
Yeah.
Well, as far as pilots go, Eric, I think I had a good time on this one.
Well, yeah. We talked a lot about Funky Phantom. And I can't remember the last time you got to talk this much about Funky Phantom.
Never. Almost never. Almost never.
Yeah.
Yep.
So that's Nick's quarter bin section. Join us next time for another quarter bin section. Another time I bring a random Batman book that most people have probably heard, but I don't care. Start your own comic book show where you talk about Batman comics no one has heard about.
Do it.
Or Moon Knight comics. I'll watch it.
Moon Knight's been showing up in Secret Avengers. I haven't read much Moon Knight outside of that, but
I started reading.
I've been enjoying him popping up.
Ed Brubaker's, right? Ed Brubaker's Secret Avengers. I think I picked it up because I was like, oh, Moon Knight's in this?
Yeah.
So I like a good Moon Knight.
Yep. Well, I'll keep you posted. Next week, I'll probably have read more Secret Avengers, and we can talk about it then.
Yeah, hopefully I'll have finished at least this volume of New Mutants I'm reading.
Fingers crossed.
Yeah. Yeah.
All right. This has been a lovely coffee break, my friend.
Yeah.
I'm just going to drink the cold dregs of this coffee and sign off.
All right. Yeah. Remember that this show is part of the Radio Meanwhile Network. So you can find more about this show, others like it, at radiomeanwhile.com. You can find me at Dusk vs. Tweak. On YouTube, Twitch, or Twitter, or any of those places. Nick Gunning and I both host the All the Book Show, which is on its own. It's All the Book Show. Oh, SoundCloud.com. All the Book Show.
Yep, SoundCloud.com/All the Books, or you can find us on Twitter at All the Book Show.
Yeah. All right. Now we say bye.
Goodbye.
Say goodnight, Nick.
So long, friends.